Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Welcome to attend our seminar series 9. Today, we are very honored to invite Simon to tell us about his exciting books and his journey become his major and his current career. First, I would let Alex introduce himself, and then Alex will introduce Simon, and then they will start the interview for today. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Yi, and for the opportunity. So we get Simon being here in this platform, talk about his new book. And for myself, I think I just kind of being guest co-host to help talk about Simon, his career and his book. And for me, I'm automotive professional in Dallas. I think, guys, how I know Simon, I think at end of sometime last year, November, I had some people post in WeChat group, say, well, we have a local ABC novelist. His new book was come out just before the Thanksgiving. And then a few days later, I saw an NPR book review. He talked about this book, like When Nothing Happened. So quite interesting. So I went to his website, check about his bio and the basic information. Then also I sent him a message say, well, it's a very interesting book. And if you have some previous book review, maybe you can watch to know more about the book and you, and especially. I think that basically especially I'm looking forward to see if we have future have a book review on our very famous local interview or book talk podcast, like we call it KR Sync. That's very famous. Or not. So really, you have a chance. You can go to that program to broadcast introduce your book and maybe get more reader to know your book. So that's here. So maybe now it's going to Simon. Maybe you can introduce about your basic bio and maybe basically about your book, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Yi, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here, and always, yeah, as Alex was saying, we met because he sent me a message after hearing about my book, and that's always very exciting to, have a book out in the world and find and meet people I never had met before through the book. And so we thought tonight we could talk about the journey of writing the book, but also I know most people in the audience are probably parents, and maybe your children are interested in writing, or maybe they're struggling with writing. And so maybe we can talk about that too, as well as majoring in English and in liberal arts careers and things like that. Whatever people are curious about. So yeah, I can talk a little bit. Did you said you wanted me to talk a little bit about my book, Alex?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my book is, just to tell you a little bit about my book, it is it's a novel that I wrote about 7 years ago. It took about 6 years to write, and it was published last year in November. And it's a novel that is set in a city called Plano, Texas, where I was born. Not where I was born, where I grew up, and it's the same city where Alex lives as well, and it's kind of north of Dallas for those who aren't familiar, and it's about a Chinese immigrant family who lives in the city and the various struggles they have getting to know each other and how they respond to kind of a crisis event in their lives that threatens to pull the family apart from each other. And so it's kind of like a quiet family drama, a kind of book like that. So yeah, I can happy to ask any specific questions about it.
Do you want to maybe show your the trainer here?
The trailer?
Yeah, or you want to be showing later on?
Yeah, you can show it. Maybe that would be easier.
Okay.
Let's see here. I don't think there's sound. Alex, I don't think there's sound.
I'm sorry.
No sound.
Oh. Why? Sorry.
对，我们这边听不到声音，只能看到录像。
没有声音。
对，你要 share sound， 你在 share content 的时候要 share sound。
Sorry, I think. Sorry about that. I think
that's okay. Maybe we can just put the link in the chat, and if anybody wants to look at it later, they can.
Okay, I don't know how to organize.
Yeah, maybe we can just put it. We'll just put the link in the chat later. Oh, Alex, you're muted. Okay, yeah. Alex, okay, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe now we have few questions from an interesting audience, and especially pretty clear from several. Yeah, you have several seminar in other place and in a WeChat group. So maybe you can think that maybe because generally a few bunch of questions, maybe you can talk us through and give today's audience some overview. I think for the agenda wise, we are talking about your book and also how about your writing progress, writing practice, and maybe advice to our young students how to improve the writing. Talk about the parenting, the career. I think special career challenging for English or liberal art major, which maybe give us a perfect example from your own success or currently good progress, and then maybe talk about a little bit about your book publication and promotion journey about that. So the first question will be, what inspire you to write about this book, about specifically Plano, this place, which is where I live now, and about how this Chinese or immigration family, our struggle, which normally we say maybe couldn't say by out the world.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I wrote it is because I had never read about a family like this in literature before, and I thought about my own childhood. I was surrounded by this really big Chinese community in Texas, but I think a lot of the books I read, if they had Chinese characters, they were either in California or New York or the coast. So I was really interested in writing about this setting of Plano, but also when I start to write something, I usually think about an image or a feeling, that kind of thing. And for me, very early on, I kept thinking about this image of a boy following his little sleepwalking sister in the middle of the night. I just kept thinking about that, like, why are these two kids outside in the middle of the night? Why is the little girl sleepwalking? What's their relationship? Where are their parents? And I think with any book, you just keep asking questions, and the more you ask questions, the more you kind of discover the story. So that's just a little bit of the inspiration.
Yeah. So yeah, when you talk about these two sisters, and I saw, I read novel, what I feel like they have a quite totally opposite characters, and I feel like Annabelle is more like a need to be a spoiled kid, and he got all the family attention. And for Jack, he's like more like a self-concerned boy. He like his mature more than his age, about 11 year old. And for me, he looks like a perfect character, but except what the incident happened in the Thanksgiving party, which for some part of he is to be blamed. So maybe you can talk about how you make these characters and yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about the two children in my book. So Jack is the 11-year-old brother, and he's very kind of quiet and obedient and doesn't cause too much trouble. But his little sister Annabelle is 5, and she's kind of troublemaker. And at school, she bullies the other children, and she tells a lie in this book that makes everyone's lives very difficult. And I think, yeah, your question of why they're so different, it's interesting because I think part of it is the circumstances of how they grew up. Jack grew up in China without his parents, while his parents were in America. And Jack was raised by his grandparents. I know a lot of Chinese immigrant families go through this experience, but Annabelle was born in America. And I think for Jack, he came to America and he was never quite comfortable. Even he didn't even know his own parents once he arrived in America. He had to kind of learn who his parents were. He had to learn what this new country was. And he also, once he came to America, he saw that his mother was already 6-7 months pregnant with his sister. So it kind of put this pressure on him to take care of his sister. But as a result, he never really thought about how he himself needs to be cared for. And maybe that's also because he's a boy and he just was never taught to speak his worries. But Annabelle, kind of from the moment she was young, she learned to be loud and speak out. And in some ways that is really good, but also in other ways that gets the whole family in trouble.
Okay. So yeah, I read your book. It basically seems there's a lot of knowledge, especially you talk about how the Jack, he's how many years stay in China with the grandparents. So their background for the parents, Pai Tian and Niang, they have quite a lot in China. And before that, when you talk about Pai's job, like electrical engineer in here in Plano, I saw there is not background or social background or the not knowledge for you, for a writer, have to be gathered together to write a book. I don't know how many, 200 more page. So I think there must be not research to do to write a book. And can you talk a little bit about that? How do you do that research?
Yeah. Yeah, I lived in Plano for a long time, so I felt like it was very familiar to me. But I think you're right. Like, it's still important to do research, even if you're writing about a city you grew up in. I went to some local museums in Plano and Dallas, and I learned some of the history that I incorporated into the novel. I also needed to do some research about China, especially thinking about the father, Liang, his background in China. And so I consulted with a professor who was very familiar with some of the rural life in China. So I had her read some of my excerpts. There's other aspects of the novel that I'm not very familiar with. For example, the family encounters the police. They also encounter child protective services. These are really dramatic and difficult kinds of situations to be in. And I just wanted to make sure I kind of captured that experience in a real way, in a way that was respectful. So I also was able to ask around, and I was able to consult with a couple lawyers who helped me, who had experience in those kinds of cases. So I talked to them. And as for the engineering, one of the mother, her Patty, she, as you said, she's an electrical engineer. That was a little bit easier because my mom is also electrical engineer. So I had a lot of conversations with her.
Yeah, there's some knowledge I know. Yeah, myself is an engineer too. So you talk about the awareness charging or the DSP something, there's some familiar terms. Yeah. And so you said you about it looks like write a book is not easy. So you studying. Think about write a book, it will take you 6 years to finally get it published. So I guess there is not involved not as you say research, interview, and also then after that you have a lot of people to review your draft. How to have you improve, and maybe you can talk about how you work around in that 6 years to get it finished.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how to answer I mean, it's a long process, but I think I wrote my first draft. It took about 2 to 3 years. And then for most of the rest of the time, I was revising. And so I think that's something a lot of people don't realize about writing, is that for a lot of writers, majority of the time is spent on revising and making it better. And when I was revising, I was also adding new things, but very rarely does a writer, the first draft is like what you ultimately read at a bookstore, so I was sending my work out to other writer friends, and they were giving me feedback. I was also, working. Eventually, I got an agent, and my agent also gave me feedback. And then eventually, we sold the book to an editor at a publisher, and that editor and I worked another year on revisions. So it was just like constantly thinking about kind of big questions about the story and the characters and the plot, but also small questions about the sentences and how to construct the sentences and what words to use, what are the right words, are there too many words, the flow, the rhythm, the voice, all these little decisions you make as a writer, you have to constantly think about. So it is a very long process.
Okay. Yeah, maybe next question, we talk section more is about how do you grow up in novel writing. So
yeah.
And also maybe you can give some advice to the young student today. So for yourself, what inspire you to like writing and start writing stuff until finally go to a writer?
Yeah, I think that's always like a childhood interest of mine. I would always write and read as a child, and I don't think I really realized that I could become a writer because I didn't know any writers, and as you know, my parents are engineers, and for me it didn't seem like an option. But I think I took some writing classes in college, and I met a kind of more, I met teachers of mine who were writers who were, that was part of their job. And I kind of learned that that's a real thing that people can do. It's not easy, but that was kind of inspired me to try it out for myself. But it was kind of a gradual process to be a writer. I also applied for graduate school. It's called a Master's of Fine Arts, MFA. which is for a creative field. And that kind of graduate school, I have to be honest, that degree is not that useful. The degree doesn't give you too much job opportunities, but that program, it gives you time, and it gives you space, and it gives you stipend and financial resources to work on your writing, to learn from other writers, to share your work with other writers and get feedback. And so once I kind of did that, I found a community of other writers, and that helped me to continue and keep pushing myself to work.
So you're saying that really at college that you find that writing is your real passion, and you go from there and you find that you have some, how to say, strength or talent on the writing.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, I think so.
Okay. So so what do you advise to high school students how to improve writing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest advice I give to students is, if you want to be a writer, you have to read. You have to read a lot, and you have to learn from what you're reading. So, for example, you don't want to read just to get information, like reading a textbook. You want to read to pay attention to how the writer creates their sentences, right? And how they create their stories. What are the structures of these stories? Try to notice little details, like try to imagine yourself writing the stories that you're reading. And that's how you learn, and that's how you get better as a writer. So I really don't think you can be a writer if you don't like reading. And then I think other advice, like I kind of mentioned this earlier, but so much of writing is revising. So, you may feel like in the beginning you finished a story, you're done. But you once you give yourself some time and maybe you read it again in a week, you realize all the things you want to change, right? So it's not like writing a story or a book is not like turning in a school assignment. It's something you have to spend a long time. It's like you have a relationship with it. Like 6 years, this book was in my head. So it was like a long-term relationship. And I think writing is a lot like that. So when you're young and you're a student, you sometimes don't think about that. So I think that's some of the advice I would give to a student.
Okay, so that's really when you finish the story, that you really need to take another time to revise and to keep make it make sense, right? So I think not what I know my not people. I think we are here, especially for first generation immigrant. We know more about the engineering field or STEM field. So from your experience, what can you maybe give generally what's the uniqueness about the liberal art education or the English major, how this college program, how they are running and how they are different from an engineering major or a computer science major? Maybe that give us a better understanding of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it depends on what you're interested in as a student, because I think you're right. If you want to be an engineer, or if you want to be a doctor, you have to take a certain major, right? An engineering major, or you have to do pre-med. But I think a liberal arts major gives you sort of, it's not really even so much about what you're studying, but it's about kind of how you're studying it. It teaches you to ask questions and to be curious about the world, and to like look at things beyond the surface level. That may be if you're studying literature or philosophy or whatever you're studying, you kind of have this sort of, it kind of changes your brain a little bit and how you process information. And I think that can be helpful, whether you become a writer or a philosopher, or whether you work in business, or whether you work in law or nonprofit. I mean, I think that it's kind of a way of thinking and observing the world. It's kind of hard to explain, but it is a sort of skill that I think more and more people are understanding that's very necessary, because we go through our lives kind of, we get so much information thrown at us on the news, on social media, in school. We get all these facts and numbers thrown at us, but sometimes we have to think about, how do we take all of that information and make meaning out of that? You know, how do we take that and make stories and ask questions and challenge the existing kind of structures in the world? And so those are the sorts of questions that I think liberal arts education will ask.
Okay, that's very good. And maybe we move to next section. Maybe I think I'm now to we Chinese community are very focused on like parenting, maybe, and on your book. This book, what I read, you see the involve multiple contrast or different scenario of parenting. Like the parent different between the two sisters, and also the conflict between Annabelle and the Elsa, her friend. I think they all be involved different parenting style, or maybe some kind of outcome from the parenting. So maybe can you really compare, or how do you think about when you're writing those kind of conflict or those kind of styles?
Yeah, I think you're right. My book explores a lot of parent and child relationships and different parenting styles. And I don't think I'm trying to make any big point about parenting. Like, I'm not a parent, and I'm sure I don't know everything about being a parent. But what I wanted to show in the book is how hard it is. There are so many complicated layers behind being a parent, so many difficult decisions and choices you have to make. Like, how do you balance protecting your child from danger, but also how do you give your child freedom? And, you know, in my book, it is set in post 9/11, around 2003. And I remember when I was a child, I was, hearing about school shootings. I was hearing about some dangerous stuff, like you can open your mailbox and you can get that anthrax, you can get sick and you can die, and it was honestly very scary. And I think as a parent, you have to make those decisions, like how do you protect your child from that? But also tell them the truth about what the world is like. And the book also sort of thinks about, like, sometimes as parents, I shouldn't say we, because I'm not a parent, but, parents, prioritize their children so much, and their children is their whole lives, but sometimes they forget about themselves and what they need. And I think, someone like the father or the mother in my story, they kind of forgot about their own struggles. And the problem with that is when they forgot about that, it kind of bubbled up inside them, and then later it exploded, right? So I think the book is kind of exploring those different dynamics in parent-child relationship.
Okay, so you see, probably can feel that, you say, because the parent have so much to struggle, and especially the parenting is a heavy burden to, maybe it's like a straw to crush them, maybe like that. And the next question would be, when I think there's no, how do you say, the different generation will have different I think living environment, and probably they have different idea and different visions. From a parenting point, can we see the parents, like our level is maybe more practical? So we've been pushing kids to go to some kind of a practical job, or go to practical majors, and well, maybe the younger generation, they are being more focused on their passion, what they like or dislike. What's your reflect on that?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be something that parents and children of different generations, especially immigrants' parents, will have to kind of explore with their child, as I did with my own parents. I think about how, a lot of immigrant parents, they did not have as many opportunities as their children. And so maybe they couldn't really pursue their passion, or they just didn't really have that many options for what they can do. But through that process of sacrifice, they have also built up more opportunities for their children. And that's why I think you have a lot more children in my generation or younger doing things that are very different, like pursuing the arts. And I think that may seem, at times it may be very scary for parents, because they don't understand that field, and they don't understand how do you succeed in that field? Is it too risky? How do you make money? But from my experience, these are the same questions children ask themselves. It's not like children don't ask themselves that. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons why, I was always thinking, I worked full-time in marketing before I really turned my attention to writing. And then I was also, in a graduate program that was funded, and I was also teaching. And so, it was not an easy life, but it was still one that I felt was more rewarding for me, and it was what I wanted to do. But that's a conversation that I think maybe I wish I had talked about more with my parents. What does writing mean to me? Why do I like writing, and what do I want to achieve, and how can my parents support me? And those are, at first it's very hard to have those conversations, because also writing, I think, is very vulnerable. And I think when you are wanting to be a writer, you feel kind of fragile. Maybe you don't want to talk to your parents about it. But I think, talking and listening to each other is really important in that process.
And I think especially at that time, I think for high school kids, they will take a while. We blame teenager, right? So,
Yeah.
But that is the important stage of their life where they have to make a decision which way they go. So what your opinion or suggestion when there is a difference or different vision when talk about their career or future major or careers? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I think I think that it would start by, don't make assumptions about each other. Children shouldn't assume what their parents believe, and parents shouldn't assume what's best for their children either. It's kind of a mutual, you should talk to each other about what's important to you, and how you can help each other, achieve your goals. I don't think it's I don't really know how to give easy answer to that, because it's difficult. But I think it just comes with a patience to again, listen to each other and try to learn about the other side, rather than just assuming what's right for the other person.
Okay, okay. Listening and really understanding from other side. I think, I think as a parent, I will struggle on that as well. And maybe next one we go to talk about your career. I think especially not families. We know because liberal art or English major, I think for us, we'll face a lot of uncertainty there, because not like an easy path when you go to doing engineering or you're going to some kind of manufacturing company or involved with production stuff, or going to, you study computer science, you go to those company, tech companies. And that's, so what triggered you to switch from English major to
I was
to English major? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was a communications and economics major, and then I dropped my economics major and I changed to English. And I think partly the reason why I did that is because I just really enjoyed my English classes more than anything else. I really look forward to going to those classes. And you know, it wasn't like I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. I kind of thought I wanted to be in business or something like that. And I think in general, if you're in business, it doesn't really matter that much what your major is. So, you know, I thought that I would just major in something that I enjoyed. And I think the more I did it, the more I kind of began to see like, oh, maybe this is something I actually want to take very seriously. I did, you know, work in business, and I was in marketing, but I wanted to take a chance and see, you know, what I could do with writing. And but I think everybody has a different path. I know other writers who are much older than me. They work full time as a lawyer or as something else, nonprofit, or they're raising their families, and maybe when they're 40, 50 years old, then they write their first book, you know. So it's I think partly I got very lucky that I was able to get this graduate school acceptance, and I was able to get fellowships and financial support, and ultimately I was able to get my first book published. But a lot of writing, I think you're right, is a lot of writing is uncertainty. You know, it's not like you put in X number of hours, you get Y output. It's not very predictable. Sometimes you can spend years writing a book, and then after a while you realize this book is not going to be published. It's not the right book. And then you have to decide, am I going to try another book? You know, I myself have tried writing different books and different stories, and a lot of those stories nobody will ever read. So that's scary for parents, and that's scary for students and for children, I'm sure. But I think it's important to realize that that's part of the process of being a writer.
Yeah. So after you graduate from Northwestern, so you work in 2 years in the industry. Did you see that part of experience is quite a kind of struggle, because that's really maybe not your passion, right? And so I think you probably experience not a struggle until you decide, well, you try to go back to the writing or going to this career path, right?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do, but I think, I mean, I had, you know, I liked my coworkers, you know, I liked my friends there, and it was exciting because it was my first years after college. So I was like, you know, be on my own. And I was really learning to be an adult. And to be honest, I don't think I was ready yet to go to graduate school or really pursue writing. I don't think I was mature enough. So I think those 2 years were important for me to grow as a person. And I think that work experience later is something that I worked at a very interesting company, and I thought, oh, maybe later I can write about it. So everything you do in life is something you can later write about. So it's all useful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's 2 years. I would agree that is really worth where you realize what you want, what you want, or who you are, and you yeah. I think that's all being important experience. We grow from what we experience. Mm-hmm. And to talk about the career future, and maybe possibly you can maybe this what possible future for English graduate? I think the
so yeah, I mean, there's no single career path for an English major. As I said, I worked in marketing, but I know English majors who have worked at, you know, a tech startup or nonprofits or became teachers, or English majors who went to law school, or they continued on to English, maybe got a PhD in English and became scholar or academic. I think really it's so many possibilities. It's about how it's more about how you use the skills you acquired in college and kind of how you position yourself as a good candidate for whatever job you're doing. You know, I think I learned this when I took my first job. I learned how to do the job by doing the job. You know, I don't think anything you learn in college is going to necessarily help me directly with marketing, right? But I had to just do the job and learn as I go. But I think the background in English maybe helped because I kind of learned reading comprehension and how to communicate and how to write, you know, how to write, you know, clearly and concisely, and how to tell stories. In marketing, you have to tell stories. So those kinds of things maybe indirectly helped.
Yeah, I think I can share. I want to read a book. This is about the author say, well, with the English major you can really do anything because the education can give you the fundamental skills and also that give you a good vision, so you can maybe climb higher even than some like a technical specific majors. That because that really the train to give you think about the vision on the liberal art education, and yeah. So I think you just got offer from Tufts University. Well, I think I remember last November when we go to WeChat group to make a seminar. We were asking you what's your plan for next step. You say, well, you're looking for a permanent long-term position for a teaching job. So, yeah, you just tell us that, well, you get you're going to the Tufts University to, well, doing what the continue your journey on the writing and career. I think that's really a great success for you. I think besides you say you are lucky, but I think really you put a good plan, or how do you say, well, get your like a plan work. I think the congratulations on that. And yeah. So what maybe you talk about a little bit about your focus on the future when you're at the Tufts University.
Yeah. So at Tufts, I'll be teaching creative writing. I'll be directing the creative writing program, and also it's a university that really supports the professor's own projects. So I'll be able to work on my second book at the same time. I'll be very busy because teaching and writing at the same time is a lot. But that's my plan to continue to get better as a teacher and as a writer.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Rennie, we have maybe last question. Maybe talk about how talk about what's like you spend a lot of time to promoting the book sale, and so what's the kind of like result? I mean, so far, how many books, or how was that like? Or I mean, the journey maybe you can share. I mean, looks like on the writer, you also take a lot of other initiative to really get your book published and in success.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many books I sold, but it's hard to sell books these days. It's fewer and fewer people read, unfortunately. And there's so many books out there, but I have been fortunate, I think, I've heard from readers and I've gotten, good reviews, like an NPR and New York Times and places like that. So it's nice to know that my book is being read by people, and not just my friends and family, but like people I don't even know are reading my book. And so that's something I'm happy about. Sorry, I forgot what your question was, but I think
yeah, I
yeah.
think that's really talk
Oh,
about
okay.
your publication. How do you feel in this past
Yeah.
1 year or something? Your reflection on that.
Yeah, I feel good. Yeah, I'm ready to. I think mainly I want to write the next book because I think sometimes writers after they publish the first book, they feel like, oh, what do I do now? and writing the second book is usually harder than writing the first book.
Really, I thought the first book will be difficult.
It is
because you get his appearance and then know the process.
I think sometimes the second book, it just feels like you're always comparing the second book to the first book, and it's like it's a different kind of experience to write a second book.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think we have maybe 10 more minutes to let's see what question we have here. And
yeah, I will just post. There are 3 questions from the chat. I will post in the chat. I will repost them so someone can answer that. So the first question is, how do you find the time and stay motivated throughout writing the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. Time is the hardest thing, really, is because especially I'm a pretty slow writer. So sometimes I honestly take a whole day working on less than 1 page of my book. And I just wonder, like, what do I do with all this time? So I think part of it is just trying to create a regular schedule. So depending on how much time you have, maybe you have 2 hours in the morning. So try to go do every 2 hours, try to do that. Try to keep a pattern. But also for me, the big thing that helped me was I received a fellowship in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this fellowship is like an arts fellowship where if you get it, you can you move to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they give you an apartment and they give you a stipend. And so for about 2 to 3 years, I didn't need to have a full-time job. I could focus on my writing. And I did teach part-time, but because I already got that financial support through the fellowship, that allowed me to have more time for my writing. So those are kinds of things that are available to writers that you can apply for. And then as far as motivation, that's also, sometimes you feel motivated, sometimes you don't. So I try to think about, it's not like I have to have this many words every day. Sometimes writing is just reading something that's related to your work, or just taking a walk and thinking about your story. There's all different ways to approach your writing. And sometimes you surprise yourself with kind of other ways to motivate yourself rather than just sitting at your computer for 5 hours straight. So again, it's a very different process than like what I'm used to doing in other fields.
So the second question, you kind of already discussed that. It asked about the job, and then how do you support yourself financially? Maybe you can say a little bit more about how other professional writers support themselves.
I think that a lot of professional writers do teach these days, whether it's at a university or K through 12. That does seem to be more and more popular. But I think a lot of writers, they just have a different full-time job. Maybe they work in tech, or they work as a lawyer or something like that, and they just have to be very disciplined, because then when they come home they have to write. They don't get that much free time, and so it's very hard. I think that there are very few writers, some super famous writers, like someone like Stephen King, he doesn't need to get another job because his books make enough money for him, So, but that's very hard to do these days. So you're right. I think most writers do have to have a full-time job besides the book. I think somebody asked how you can connect with other writers, how you pick people to review your book. Connecting with other writers is hard, but what helped for me was I went going to graduate school. I met other writers. Also, I sometimes go to conferences and those fellowship programs. You meet other writers, but even without that, usually within your local city, there are local writers groups and things like that. If you look at, there are sometimes community workshops and community programs. So you can sort of do a Google search and see like creative writing groups, in your city or something like that. And you might be able to find something. I don't actually pick people to review my book though. As far as, who reviews my book, that's usually just, it's kind of like my publisher will send my book out to a lot of different media people, and the various newspapers and magazines, they have their own system of deciding what books to review, but I don't have much control over that.
I think you mentioned about this. Maybe you mentioned about the book club, or you mentioned about that, or the trainer. Maybe that's something is kind of resource.
That's a new resource. I don't have the link with me right now, but the link was on the PowerPoint. Maybe one of you can put the link in the chat. Here. But that trailer that we were hoping to play for you, that trailer was made by a new organization called Book Club, and Book Club is kind of it's a space where writers can upload their book and discussion questions and things like that. And if you're a reader and you're interested in that book, you can use that website as a resource, especially if you have your own book club. You can like look at the questions and discuss them among your group. You can also contact the writer through this. And so you have to register, and the website just started. So if you're interested, you can use this link to sign up. But that's really if you're either a writer with a book, or if you're someone who just loves to read, this can be a helpful website for you.
So for that club, for specific for your page, you are going to host some kind of live conversation, or how that works?
I think that will be a feature later on where you can have live conversations with readers, but that organization approached me late last year, and they wanted to feature me on the website. So they actually filmed me in a lot of talking about my book and asked me a lot of questions about the book, and they shot these very nice quality videos about my book. So those videos are all on the website as well.
Okay, I think there are two more questions. See, what do you like a Wattpad? I'm not familiar with. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of Wattpad, but I've never used it. So yeah, sorry, I don't actually know too much about it.
Okay. So when do you think your book is ready to get published, and how to decide?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I think that you should definitely share your book with some friends, or people you trust, and get their feedback. Also, try to think about like the kinds of books that are already out there that you feel like your book is kind of similar with or in conversation with in some way. And and read those books and kind of see. I think that's something I think we all have to learn, is sort of like, you know, do you feel like your book is if you feel like your book is ready to be published, then do you feel like your book could be on that bookshelf with those other books, you know? And or is it something that you need to spend more time with, you know, revising? I told you know, as I said, revising is such a big part of the process. I think, you know, patience is important, and also just giving yourself some distance from your writing and say like, okay, I finished it and now I'm not going to read it for 3 weeks, and then I'm going to read it again after 3 weeks. How do I feel? Do I still like it? Or are there things that I feel like I want to change? You know, so that was kind of something that I always had to do. But I think at some point I just thought like, okay, I've done everything I could, and now I need to send it out to an agent or editor, because I still feel like if there needs to be any changes, I cannot come up with those changes myself. I need somebody else to help me. So that's when I realized I was ready to submit the book. But yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to answer that question, because I always ask myself the same question.
Yeah, now maybe one more follow-up question for that. So for example, you say you decide your book is good to go, then you go into the agent or going to publisher, then get some, probably they will give you some comments, feedback. Sometimes maybe you feel, well, this part need to change, or you think, well, that should be the way as you write as is. How do you handle those kind of critics or something to revise, which you don't feel should be?
Yeah, well, that's important to know, like, what is your vision for the book? And when people give you feedback, you may think about it like, oh, they're giving you some options. They're opening some possibilities for your book. It doesn't mean you have to listen to everyone's feedback, because even my book is out in the world. Everybody has different opinion on the book. They like 10 people may like one part of the chapter, and then 5 people look at it and they're like, I don't like this. So you're never going to please everyone. So that's why it's really important for you to gradually understand what's important to you as a writer, and how you grow that sense of yourself is you have to just practice a lot. You have to write a lot, you have to read a lot, and you gradually kind of learn, what good writing is to you. But how you see good writing is sometimes different from what somebody else sees, because it is, on some level, it is subjective. Yeah, and I see some other questions also about like reading. Kathy asks, how did you find reading is not just reading, but you start to notice the plot development, characters? I said that extensive reading is helpful, but how do you pay attention to the other things? Yeah, I mean, that's something you have to train yourself to do too. Just like you train yourself to be a better writer, you train yourself to be a better reader. And I think it takes time, but for me, it's always about asking questions like, okay, why do I think the writer wrote it this way? What if the writer wrote it a different way? What different effect would it be? So to just really be curious and read slowly and really think about, the decisions the writer's making, it's something you have to kind of force yourself to do. But I do think it's very helpful to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, one more question.
Oh, question about students. Some students choose to publish books in middle school or high school. What do you think about this? I'm not sure. It's kind of like complicated. I think that I would first ask the student why they want to publish it, and they may have a reason that I don't really realize. But sometimes publishing can be really a good way for the student to kind of introduce their work into a community and then meet other writers in the community. And so that can be very exciting. But something I think a student should realize, though, is if they publish something once, they cannot publish it again. So, publishing doesn't have to be, I think in general, I tell students who are younger not to worry so much about publishing, and just to instead focus on just writing and getting better as a writer. But I do understand why people want to publish, because I think publishing helps you kind of get validation, and you receive feedback from other people. You get to share your work. I think that's very exciting. So if that is really important to the student, then I can see why it's a good idea too.
So another question, what do you think about the writing competition for students? I think as we talk about some middle school, high school, some writing competition there.
Yeah, I think they can be helpful, but I would just, it's so early, I think, to be already putting your work out there. And I know a lot of students like send their work to that Scholastic writing competition. And I think it can be very exciting if you win, or you place and you get a award. But even if you don't, I think it's important to just, understand that that doesn't mean that you're not good enough. I mean, when you're writing that early, so much can change. Even now, I'm 31 and I feel like so much can change. I'm gonna 10 years later, I'm gonna be a very different writer than I am now. So I say go for it, but just don't worry too much about whether you win or don't get it. Don't win. That doesn't determine if you're a good writer or not.
Okay, I think there are no more questions. Anything else you want to share from you, Simon?
Oh, there's one more question previously.
Sorry.
I'll post it in the chat. As a writer, which book has the greatest influence to you and why?
I don't know if I can pick just one book. Yeah, I think I can maybe put down some writers that influenced me. I'll put it in the chat. Some writers that a lot of these I read starting in college, but Chekhov, there's a Chinese American writer named Gish Jin, as well as another Chinese American writer named Yuyun Li.
Not me who know her.
Oh yeah, she was a scientist too. I think she came. Edward P. Jones, Toni Morrison, Shirley Jackson. I'll just put some of those names down here. Yeah, those are some writers that I go back to a lot, but I can't say that I have one single book that is the greatest influence.
So do we have more questions, or maybe the time to wrap up?
I guess we're out of time.
Fine. I don't see any more questions. And any other question from the audience, you can just open your mic.
Yeah, there's a question about what genre I focus on. I mainly write fiction, but I write some essays and some nonfiction. But yeah, within I don't really have a specific genre like a mystery or romance or detective stories or something like that. I sort of, if there's a genre that is in the bookstore, it's probably called literary fiction. I'll put it in here. And the literary fiction is sort of kind of a umbrella term that is just speaks to a kind of it's really hard to define, but it's kind of fiction that is not always focused on these particular conventions of genre like romance or science fiction, but just kind of human stories, and can be anything really. So sorry, I know that's not very helpful. Yeah, I would say to answer your follow-up question about what sort of genres of books to read, I would just recommend people to I mean, first read the books that they really love, but also to read books that to really push yourself, go outside of your comfort zone, and read books that maybe are challenging, right, for you, and you maybe initially don't like as much, because I think you can learn from those books even more. So yeah, read outside of your genres too, I would say.
This is Kathy. I have a final question, if you don't mind. I have an 8-year-old boy, and he loves to write. And his writing does not sometimes have a little bit imagination, right? Sometimes it's just a kind of a copy of Magic Tree House because that's his favorite. Blah blah blah. I'm sorry. So what's your suggestion if you are 8 years old, and your parents support you to pursue a writing career or just to enjoy it? So what's your suggestion? Now, what kind of books or reading or anything you can do, or if you turn the clock back?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very lucky to have a parent who's really supporting him. I don't really, I have to say, I don't really have good recommendations for books for 8-year-old because I don't really read those books right now.
That doesn't have to be 8 years old. I mean, if you turn the clock back, you are 8 years old, and your parents support you, and I mean, what are you going to do if that's?
Yeah, I would just keep, I don't know, I'm sorry, I know this is not that helpful, but I would just keep writing, like I would I don't think there's any special thing that he needs to do. I think if he really enjoys it, he should keep doing it. And this is mine. Yeah, and I think he'll discover on his own,
Right.
What sort of things. I don't think, I don't think there's anything special that if he likes doing it, just keep kind of making time and space for him to do that.
Right. Okay, I'll continue to support him. Thank you.
Yeah, I think a couple of days ago we have a local WeChat. We have exact same thing where the mom will say he has a twin sister girls. Wow, they writing kind of sometimes feel just they have just writing. So for parents really just to listen and to let the kid to even play to her what the book is about, and really he trained to enjoy and also try to guide them to think or try to say next step, but really give the kids really support him and give them the freedom, encouragement to continue to eternal their imagination. I think that's probably something is here maybe that.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was around 8 or maybe younger. I would write, like my parents would take me to their work because there's no one to watch me. So I just take on my seat, I'd write my stories, and then I would later make a book, and I kind of use yarn to connect the pages. And then I kind of made a book, and I made a little bookstore at home and said, okay, Mom, Dad, you can buy my books.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of fun, and maybe that gave me encouragement too.
Right. That's what he does too. He staple his novels together, and show me. Yeah, it's really fun.
Hi, this is Chrissy. I have a question for the host. I remember last time we have a webinar for science fiction.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Yeah, you remember?
Yes.
Do you have the recording of that? Because that was very helpful, but I didn't. I want to review it. I want to re-listen to it. Is that possible?
Yeah, for sure. You can just add my WeChat, and then I put it in the chat.
Okay.
And
Thank
if
you so
you
much.
follow our 公众号 Art of Sciences, then everything is in there. Yeah.
Oh, so under your WeChat 那个公众号你们有是吗？
Yes,
有那个 record
yes,
of
yes.
last time.
So every seminar, the next day, the recording will have a new post with the recording link.
Okay, I will
Okay,
go and
so-
find it myself. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we can re-listen this one too, right?
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here, everyone. I really appreciate you being here, and hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, and I posted the link in the chat again for ordering the book. I actually just ordered one from Amazon, so I'll
Me
make my
too.
kids.
Me too.
I'll have my kids read them.
I just did it.
Thank you.